Imagine connecting with your future customers in a way that feels authentic, engaging, and pressure-free. In this episode, keynote architect Andrew Chesnutt reveals how delivering the right keynote can not only educate, but also inspire your audience, all while effortlessly generating leads. If you've ever felt uncomfortable with traditional sales tactics, this is the conversation that will change the way you think about growing your business.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show, where you will discover how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. Paul Guyan, the mastermind behind the Lead Machine, introduces you to trailblazers who inspire you to implement life-changing solutions and systems you can model to nurture your leads and get your offers seen by your ideal clients who will invest in themselves and you. Be sure you visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, tune in and get ready to transform your vision into reality.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyan, your host, Lead Machine coach, and the founder of the Lead Machine Marketing Group and Mastermind. And I'm dedicating to helping you tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. And whether you're just starting out or you want to take your business to the next level, let's get this conversation started and turn your dreams into reality. Our guest today is Andrew Chesnutt. He has 20 years of experience in the learning industry, and he is an experienced keynote architect who specializes in helping entrepreneurs tell their stories and sell their ideas. You're in the right place. His unique process for creating impactful keynotes has transformed the way entrepreneurs connect with their audiences, driving both engagement and sales. And so whether you're just looking to elevate or captivate a room or close a deal, Andrew is here to guide you every step of the way, and he's ready to craft their stories and elevate their brands together. So Andrew, welcome, my friend. Thank you so much. It's nice to meet you and have you on the show today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I really appreciate the experience.
You bet. So when I think of keynotes, I think of Brian Tracy and Stephen Covey and Zig Ziglar and these fabulous icons of the past and the present who just command all this attention. They get big bucks, big bucks to speak, and go, gosh, and can I really do a keynote? So how do you get into that? And keynotes is not as scary as you might think.
No.
So can you explain how people can get into that business and why it's important?
Well, there's one piece of information I like to share with anyone I work with, and that is everyone gets worried about stepping up on stage. I know professional speakers who have been doing it for 40 years who still get a little bit of a tinge of something every time they step on stage. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
Our number one thing that we run into, and this is the main issue why people do that, is we're designed just in our brains to not want to be noticed. That was part of our fight or flight mechanism, where I don't want to be noticed by the big saber-toothed tiger. So standing up in front of people, put yourself in a very vulnerable position. And people feel they don't have power in that position. And so this is what I tell people. The one thing I say is there's all kinds of advice out there. And that is, envision the audience in their underwear. Do this thing here. Do this thing here. There's a lot of that. But there's one that you really should remember that I've seen work the best. And that is understand that this is everyone's number one fear. And you are up there and the audience is not.
Yeah.
That person judging you in the audience has not done this. And therefore, if they would like to judge you, they can walk up and do this themselves. But you're doing something that most people won't do, or most people can't do, or they're not willing to take that leap and say, even if I'm shaking, I'm doing this. And so I guess that's the first piece of information that I can share with people is you can do this. It is not as hard as it seems. Everything is hard at first. Everything takes some time, but it really is not as difficult as you think. And I also think that as entrepreneurs, we all have a story behind what we do.
Yeah.
Let me go into really briefly my background and how I got started in presentations and keynotes. And so, as you said, 20 years in the learning industry. And for me, I can remember really, really clearly. I was asked to create a training for a large pharmaceutical corporation. I was doing some help building a call center for them. And this training was It was an FDA compliance training specifically designed for people that had messed something up and we had to retrain them. At this point, because we were a third-party provider, everyone was very concerned about keeping this large corporation very happy with us. And so when we started to see these issues, of course, everyone freaked out and wanted to come up with their way of handling it, which turned into a specification document from my boss, my boss's boss, my boss's boss's boss, and I think 3 compliance lawyers.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine about what this thing was. It was atrocious.
Yeah.
I think the only way
by PowerPoint.
death by PowerPoint is very, very true. I think
Yeah.
academic assault is the other way to put it. But I think both are equally accurate. So I get this thing done. It's 164 slides and was going to be delivered in about 2 hours. That's a very intense course.
Yeah.
Of course, the day that I am about ready to roll this thing out, we're having an FDA audit and the auditor wants to see it. So I step into this room, this conference room full of people, and people who are all, their titles are initials, like all VPs and, yeah. With the auditor at one end of the table, this room full of others. I had not been in the industry very long at this point. I don't think I'd been in 5 years at this point. And I hand over this PowerPoint and I wait as the auditor looks through this thing. And he says to me, "Is this meant to help or is this meant to punish?" Understanding that FDA auditors have no sense of humor, and after a very brief cardiac event, I realized I never, ever wanted to be in that situation again. Never wanted to make a presentation that wasn't going to give value to people, that wasn't going to really help bring something to the world, that wasn't going to be academic assault, that wasn't going to be, like you said, death by PowerPoint. Yeah. I realized at that moment I had a gift for doing presentations. This was not the best use of it. Fast forward a number of years, my mom had published a book, and she wanted to get it out to the world. And so, of course, I went back to some things that I knew about how to build this in presentations, and that was TED Talks. So we got into the process of creating a TED Talk for her, and I fell in love with this format. Mm-hmm. It is storytelling. That's it. Pure storytelling and getting information from one point to another in the most efficient way. So that is really what I loved the most about presentations. Let's wrap this all the way around and kind of bring it around to your initial question here. I'm a storyteller. Sometimes we take the long road.
Of course. So do I.
So let's wrap that around. And if you said somebody is starting and they're just trying to do it, here's what I want you to do. And here's what you can take from that. First of all, don't use visual junk food. I see this a lot with people when they're creating a presentation, where what ends up happening is you put a lot of bullet points because you're not confident or you don't feel confident.
Yeah.
Terrible idea. I call it visual junk food. It has no nutritional value. It's basically just there to make you feel good. Use images instead. Then use that with stories. Instead of trying to sell me your product, what I want you to tell me is something more along the lines of, here's how I found this. Here's what made me invent this. Listen to commercials that you really are going to listen to, and that's what they start with, is that story and that story component. Okay. Yeah. So minimal use of PowerPoints, if at all. Craft that story of talk to me as a human, like talk to your audience as a human. Tell me the story of where you are, and then do it. It's going to be terrible at first. My very first podcast was on this really obscure podcast in only in Southern Florida for like an association of cleaners. It was terrible. I was awful. And I'm a speaker. I come from a line of speakers. My mom was a great speaker. My grandfather was a great speaker, and I sucked at it. It was terrible, but I did it.
Were you by yourself?
I was by myself, and it was live.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it was live.
This is way easier, I think. Just having someone to talk to.
Exactly, and for me, it was nice because it was also live, so it's not out there anymore. So it's now gone away. I would highly recommend that too. But get out there and just do it. Sometimes the best thing to do is to start, especially with something that's really as anxiety producing as being a speaker, as getting up in front of a group of people. Even though you can even the playing field, knowing, hey, you guys aren't up here, you want to judge me, come up here and do this.
Yeah.
It's still, yeah, just do it. Oftentimes I'll have clients rehearse in front of Zoom. Just get onto a Zoom and record it. Talk to your cat. Doesn't really matter how you do it. Just keep doing it, keep rehearsing it. You will get better. And it becomes actually fun. I love speaking. I really do. It's a passion of mine. I love getting up in front of people and sharing something, bringing some sort of value, leaving them in a better condition than I found them. And so eventually the nerves mostly wear off and you'll end up loving it. So best
Yeah.
thing to start.
And I bet you were the class clown, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. I got in trouble a lot in grade school too. Uh,
Yeah.
you mentioned something about bringing value to the
Yeah.
to the customer or to the listener. I think that's really super important. So how do you select your audience for your keynote, and how do you make sure that you're delivering that value?
Very good questions, because I think a lot of times when people come to me with a keynote, they don't know why they're doing it and they don't know what customers they're talking to. And that's actually I have a framework that I use. And those are the first two things. Why are you doing this and who are your customers? You're not going to reach every person when you're doing a keynote. So keynotes, let me define something. Keynotes can be used for 2 points. There's two parts they can be used in. You can say them live. We all see people do this, or you can do it as a webinar, as a lead magnet. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but there's two different types of two different ways to do this. Let's talk about an audience first, because it's a little bit easier to understand an audience in a room versus an audience in webinars. They work the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You might have 100 people in a room. You're not going to talk to all 100, because all 100 have different goals. All 100 have different outcomes they want to see. All 100 have different levels that they're at. Some are experienced entrepreneurs, some are not. So what I want you to do is, in your mind, when you first start defining that, basically create a buyer avatar, like 2 or 3 of them for your presentation, and you're speaking directly to those people. The rest can follow along for the ride. They'll get some value out of it, but you're speaking to your 3 avatars, 2 or 3 avatars within the audience, and defining them. And I put names to mine. It makes it easier to discuss stuff with them, right?
Course.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way that I would recommend, is just making sure that you know who you're speaking with before you start writing a presentation. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
And speaking of writing, do you write I know the answer to this, but for those who are listening, and myself included, do you write them out and read them and practice them so that you remember them? Or how do you how do you figure that out? I'm sure you got a framework for that.
There is. Depends on what I'm working on. So TED Talks, yes, they're all memorized. They're 18 minutes. It's a very strict format. So that has to be done that way.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things I brought, and you bring up a really good question. That's one of the things I brought from TED Talks is, yes, I do script them. And I do this so that whoever my client is has training wheels at first. It doesn't mean they can't go off script. It just helps them to be able to work. I've got a couple of clients who've been with me for years who we just do bullet points. You need to hit three points on this slide and we're done. They're very experienced speakers. They worked with me for years. They know what they're doing. But especially when you're first, but even with them, I sometimes, if we're doing something totally new, I still will script it out. So I do it more because I want you to be able to sit back, look at this script, read it over in your head, and visualize yourself in front of people giving this keynote. So it's important to be able to do that. And often it's just easier if we write it out as a script. Then I use the script to make a presentation from that and go make an actual PowerPoint and go on from there. So yeah.
Right. And now when they're delivering it, though, they're not reading a script. They're using some prompts, possibly the slides and the images will help them bring up that section of the presentation. Is that how that works? Or I guess it depends on who you are and the way you learn and the way how confident you are and how well you've rehearsed.
Yeah. Yep. You're correct. Rehearsal is a huge part of this. And that's what that script is for, is to help people rehearse. But it's really more about the goal of a presentation, or somebody like a keynote architect in my world. My goal is to make sure that you stand up there and you're able to focus on what you need to focus on. We've done the groundwork. We've done the rehearsals. We've done the scripts. We've done everything in the back end to support you the best we can. And so you're right. That is one of those things where we just want to make sure that, you don't have to follow it. I have some that go completely off script. As long as you're in the general vicinity of where we were going, that's fine. There's some clients I'll put, here's your 3 bullet points and here's your script. Totally depends on the person, because you're right. Each person has a different style. Each person has a different way of speaking, and trying to again, it's really all about the speaker. It's all about making sure that we support the speaker to the best we can. Yeah, because you've got something to share. You have something to share. You have something that needs to be out there in the world, and we want to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, and I think that having a purpose for what your message is, and having that alignment with the audience, and they'll be able to sense your passion if you really have that mission, that ministry per se, the message that you want to get to the world. If you don't have that, then you better go back and find it, so that you are authentic, and people they have their BS meters up more than ever, and they can tell. So we bumped up against this framework thing a couple of times. So can you share more about the framework and how people might be able to apply that? And of course, they can hire you and get with you and into your world, which we'll talk about in a little while. But so what is the framework that you use? Because you call yourself a keynote architect. So what is that framework? Or there's probably more than one, but can you just give us kind of the 30,000 foot, maybe drill down a little bit?
Absolutely. One of the big things about presentations in general, or keynotes, whatever you're giving, is having some sort of a framework around it really helps. I found it to help me. I built this because in my company, I was just writing keynotes. I was just doing it, and it was just sort of a natural gift. But I got to the point where I realized that's not scalable. So I need to write this stuff.
Right.
And I wanted to teach people how to actually master these skills, and how to use all of that information in your head. That's one of the major reasons I have people come to me, is because they're like, I've got all these ideas. We're entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs are really badly ADHD. It's our superpower, but it can also be our downfall. I heard it referred to the other day as an ADHD brain goes really fast, but the steering's awful and the brakes suck.
That's
when you go in
great.
1,000 directions, it's just not easy to steer it. I'm here to help them steer it, and that's where the framework came from. Is I want people to be able to do it. So the framework itself, the very first thing I always ask is, why are you doing this, and who is your audience? And we really need to get down, like you were kind of alluding to earlier. You need to know what you're doing. You need not just the content itself, but it's really more about, who can I serve best? Who can I hone in on? It's advertising is the same thing, where who specifically can I hone? If your customer avatar is, yes, all the people, it's not the greatest way to do this. Then we take them through the structure of it as well. And the first thing I start off with is a hook. And this comes from TED Talks a bit, where I want something that's going to pull somebody in quickly. And then, so the story that I told earlier about the FDA compliance auditor, my hook on one of the presentations I give is, I want you to imagine this: standing in a conference room full of executives, and you are a junior staff member. You give your presentation over to an FDA auditor who asks you, is this meant to help or punish? And then I go into a backstory about how I got to that position. And what that does is, you've now grabbed your attention. You have the 5-second rule, because that's about how long you have to grab somebody's attention. Again, ADHD, lots of things, lots of devices around us. We have to mitigate this, right? Then we go into the backstory first. And then what I do is I go into what I call my mountain Sherpa peak sequences. And what this is your mountain is what you overcame. The Sherpa is the thing or person that helped you to overcome that. And the peak is the outward, the end result of having been through that process or that struggle. And an interesting thing happens. First of all, there's 2 reasons I do this. The first one is the way that your brain processes information, or especially new memories, is it takes something old, says, does this correlate with it, kind of tweaks it around a bit and makes a new memory. And so I'm showing the old way versus the new way. If we take a look at a lot of famous presentations, Steve Jobs' rollout of the iPhone, just about anything by Martin Luther King, what they did is they said, here's the old way, here's the new way. It's a process. I picked it up from a lady named Nancy Duarte, who is an amazing just presentation person. And it shows the way that, you have old version versus new version. And then we also just kind of bridge the gap and make sure we see how to do it. So that's the next part, are these sequences. We have about 3 of them, 3 to 5, depending on what you're doing. At the end of one of these sequences, you also can teach. So here's where I was, here's what helped me, here's where I am now, and here's how you can do it. So there's a
Yeah.
teaching aspect on the end of it as well.
Hmm.
Then at the end, make sure you give takeaways, 3 to 5. Here's something actionable you can do to be able to make that work. And then we have a roundup. So that's like the very high level view of how these work. And the nice part is I do it through stories too. I want to hear
Yeah.
those stories of why you did it. So literally with my clients, I get onto a Zoom call with you. I have Fathom AI note taker that helps me to take some notes on it. And we go through, we chat, we just have a chat. And what we're doing in the background is I'm asking strategic questions, kind of guiding you through the process of getting this. But really, honestly, we're gonna have a chat. We're gonna talk.
Right.
Yeah, it actually turned into a podcast. I was on with one of my clients going, "This is a podcast." So
Heck yeah, you
yeah,
should record it all. Record it
exactly,
all. You
exactly
never
right.
know how you might use it.
You know,
And so during this journey, these sequences,
yeah.
how are you using what one of my business mentors calls it seed marketing, dropping
Mhm.
seeds, or actually it's called opening a loop. More people will probably be recognize
Mhm.
opening a loop. Like well, we've only got time. There's 5 ways to do this A, B, C, and D, but
Mhm.
we've only got enough time for 3. And
Mhm.
these are them, and so you just kind of leave them hanging. Is that something that you do? You drop these little open loops during that journey?
Mhm. You're opening a conversation, and so what you're doing is it's also a really great way to manage objections. Because
Uh-huh.
what you're doing is instead of saying you have this objection and I'm going to go forward with it, you're going to be like, hey, look, I learned this really cool thing. You know,
Yeah,
people want to learn more. Hey, I learned this new thing, and let me show you a little bit more about it in that teaching sequence afterwards. Let me show you more about what I learned. Here's some,
yeah.
and the story behind it. Cool thing happens when you're telling a story, especially a personal one in front of an audience, is your brainwaves sync. It's the coolest thing in the world. If you've been in the middle of a really, really good conversation or you hear somebody speak, for me, it's Ed Milet. I love the way he speaks. He's really good. And where everything else can be happening outside the world, you don't care. You are really, really into that story. That's what happens is your brainwave has synced
Mhm.
with the speaker. And so what when you're also in a very open space at that point too. You're not really here with, like you said earlier, your BS filters up.
Yeah.
Where you're saying, oh, you're trying to sell me something. This isn't the traditional, speaker selling where it was like, rah, 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 let's go teach you all these things, tell you all the scary things, and then go to the back of the room and sign up right now. It's very different. And it's for people that don't really, some people do very well with that style. Great. Hey, cool. If it works for you. My style is very, very different. And you're right. We do seed throughout it. So I'm starting that conversation with you, you
Okay,
know?
well, I'm glad you mentioned going to the back of the room
Yeah.
because that's what a lot of people. I know Russell Brunson. We both know who,
Yeah.
who he is, and he
Yep.
tells a story about how he was asked to go speak somewhere, and and he wrote the thing on a napkin in his room, and he really great talk. Really,
Mm-hmm.
some really. He always drops some pearls of wisdom and stuff. Wow, I can do that, and he makes you because he's just a regular guy,
Mm-hmm.
and he can do it. He's a billionaire, but
Yeah.
he can do this stuff. And then he went to go sell it, and he just bombed.
Yeah.
He bombed and I think that's why he wrote the perfect webinar script,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest.
Yeah.
But he bombed. He could not sell. He was so embarrassed that he got 0 sales from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you do about that? So how do you? What kind of offers work? What's some non-slimy strategies for making some sales? Because I mean, you may be a keynote or one of the speakers on a panel or at a virtual conference or whatever, but you still want them to take you up on you want to have an offer, and you want to generate leads
Yes.
and obviously turn that into sales. So what
Mm-hmm.
are some great ways to do that? And I guess we'll start with in the room
Mm-hmm.
and then virtual.
So either way, the first thing you're trying to do, and this is kind of part of the sales process, is you're trying to build a relationship with your audience. And if
Mhm.
you, as a mentor of mine once said, give your best stuff away for free. And he's also an amazing speaker, Greg Reed. He's on, he's
I
been
know,
in my
Greg.
podcast. Yeah, awesome, awesome human being. So what he said is give your best stuff away for free. What you want to do is leave the audience with this feeling like, dude, I want to learn more. I want to learn
Yeah.
more from this guy. I want to
Yeah.
hear what he has to say. And now what you have are rabid evangelists. You now have people that are already ready to go. So that's the best thing to do is that share that story. Ask for the sale. So you don't want to step away from saying something like, if you want to hear more about this, let's hop onto a call. Or if you want to hear more about this, hey, I have this coaching program. Let's go, let me show you how to do this. You could still ask for the sale, but you're not being that slimy salesperson, right? So
Yeah.
again, the key points are that what you're doing is you're setting these people up to have a sale with you. You're giving them value, giving them massive value, but also it opens that conversation. A lot of my clients end up getting this tribe around them. And then you take that tribe now goes out and sells for you. Maybe
Yeah.
with or without a referral, they just really love what you've done for them. And now they want to go out and do it. But you're trying to become, like Russell Brunson calls it, the attractive character.
Yeah.
And part of it is doing it through this. So that's
Yeah.
it. I actually have a friend of mine. I won't mention his name because I want to protect the guilty, but he always goes out and speak. He's an amazing speaker, gives absolutely just really high value. And he's in a really niche market in real estate. And he does not have a coaching program. And it's funny, everyone walks up to him and goes, how do I learn more? Because he tells about the story about, his flips gone wrong and stuff like this and how to make these work. And that everyone wants to learn more from it. Again, he never makes a sale. It's just, but he could if he had these coaching programs behind him, trying to get it to work, but he's not quite there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense to me that whatever you're talking about or whatever you're called on to talk, like maybe you're at a real estate marketing conference and you have an offer that's going to help people gear up their presentation skills to sell more real estate. So how important it is to have that alignment. Can you talk about the alignment of your talk and your offer?
Mm-hmm. The alignment between them, your talk should educate based on what you're doing. It should give your audience what happens with education. It's a really good question, by the way. What happens with the education side of things is now what you've done is put your audience into the mindset of, oh yeah, that's me too. I remember years ago when I was probably about 6 or 7 years old, there was a gum commercial on TV that said, are you a gum chewer? And I can always remember saying, I am.
Yes.
Shortly after my mother had to inform me that no, most of the US is at this point. But what it did is that identified with me.
Yeah.
I now thought, hey, yeah, I'm that person too. Again, why that mountain Sherpa peak sequence works so well is from that mountain. Now you have your customer identifying with you, and it can make it really easy to then kind of guide them through that sales process and get to the end because now they've already identified, they've self-selected. It's also why you want to be super clear about what that is in storytelling, because
Yeah.
now they can put themselves in that thing. So I think that's really the answer to your question is that you want them to be able to be in that room with you. And in order to do that, you have to have a very, very clear picture of it. And that was something I didn't have at first. And it was funny. A friend of mine said to me, he's like, I don't actually know what you do. And a speaker, he knew what he was doing. He knew what this world was. There was a
Yeah.
disconnect. I didn't have it dialed in enough. And so after a
Yeah.
lot of work, I finally got it super dialed in and knew exactly what my product was and how it was going to help and who it was going to help, had a buyer persona defined. And then now I could go out and do a keynote on it.
Yeah.
Because now I knew who I was speaking with.
Yeah. And sometimes speakers take a very broad topic and weave it into their core offer, like leadership, lessons in leadership. And that's a really super broad topic. Appeals to a lot of people, especially executives and entrepreneurs. But they want tactics. They want to know, okay, so how do I get from here to there? So he uses a lot of strategy like there, but he does have a core thing that that help and books. He's got 7 books that, and he's a great speaker, helps them get to that point where they, oh gosh, I want to hire this guy to train my sales staff because he knows how to get referrals without asking,
Yep.
that kind of thing. So that's a great way to do it. And one thing, he was we coached together, and he would always make new slides for every presentation, but they had the same theme, And he used a lot of images, but a lot of bullet points. So he was a little bit of, but he's a fast,
Too much junk food.
he's a fast talker though, and a really good at it. So, but I used to try to get him to say, hey, you've got a core message. Let's just stick with that. You don't have to, stay up all night the night before your presentation to take the same presentation and gear it to these people. But I think he still does it today. Not the most efficient way of doing it. So do you have some tips for people on how they can improve their PowerPoint presentations and support this framework that you're talking about?
Yep. So as far, let's talk about bullet points again, because there's something really specific that happens with bullet points.
Yeah.
So not only do we want to not do visual junk food, your presentation should be your backup singers. You should be out in front. The backup singers should not upstage you. And what happens is when you have a lot of bullet points on it, you can have a few. What I do is I highlight some words, like key words in the middle, so people remember it quickly. If you have a lot of bullet points, what happens is people naturally look at them and read them. It kicks in your language processing centers. And so there's just this natural instinct to look and read. They are not listening to a word that you're saying.
Yeah.
And so it totally distracts from what you're doing. And that's not the most efficient way to bring in information. That's like bullet points are not the way to do it. So there's much better ways to do it. Imagery, like you were saying, he uses a lot of images. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Something that will then get a few different parts of the brain, like the auditory brain, they're listening to you, the visual brain, now they're seeing, whatever you're talking about, or a visual diagram or some other thing. So keep it simple is how I like the presentations. But as far as like going through and giving a presentation to each individual person, which is what it sounds like he does, it sounds like he's really not dialed in on exactly who his audience is, and he's just trying to cast a wide net. And I have not seen that work out well. Usually it's a lot of effort. Yes, usually I have sat at events with speakers that like 3 hours before they're going to go on, completely rebuilding PowerPoint decks.
Yeah.
I know the stress. I know the struggle.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is I just think you're trying to get everyone, again, target 2 to 3 key people, like key avatars. It doesn't have to be 2 to 3 people in 100 room. It's 2 to 3 types of people you want to hit. So if you're in real estate, great. Okay, I'm going to go give a talk on real estate. But instead of real estate, are they investors, or are they flippers, or they do subject to, or they do something else? Try to get a better idea for exactly who you're talking to. So in that entire group of real estate professionals or real estate investors, I want the people doing the subject to, which is a really weird part of real estate. I want to talk specifically to them. Everyone else is going to follow along for the ride. They will get some value from it, but those are the people I want to specifically talk to, and only go to venues or only do events that will have a larger number of this type of people in it. So you wouldn't go to like you wouldn't go to a culinary, speak at a culinary school. If you were doing real estate, it's a bad idea. You're not really going to get a whole lot.
If you're hungry.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Or you need some help with a high-end kitchen, maybe, but
right.
Yeah. Go where the waters are fertile, Yep.
Yeah. So what are some of the mistakes that keynote speakers make that are easy to avoid?
We covered a lot of them. So the first one is just do not be dependent on your PowerPoint. That is your backup singers. So that's the first one.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a huge thing. And once you think about it, backup singers should not be upstaging you. So instead, what I do is I put things in the notes section. In PowerPoint or Keynote, the two big ones out there, they have a notes section, and you can actually create a PDF out of it. And I have my speakers actually train from that. So they'll use that to memorize where they're at.
Gotcha.
I have one that likes to write paper notes. I do too, so totally not judging, but he can write paper notes in the margins on it too. It really helps him out to be able to study it. So that's the first one. The second one, make very sure that you understand what your what you're trying to sell and who you're trying to sell it to. I see speakers go out and just try to talk about a group of things. And if you don't have a really good structure to it and you don't have it really well thought out, it's going to fail. It's not going to go well. The third one I can do is to say outline first. You don't have to use any specific structure, just outline it. Here's the 3 topics I want to hit. Under those 3 topics, here's 5 specific points. It's a super basic way to be able to do it, but it does work. And this is what I wanted. These are the goal, and this is the goal of the entire presentation. And here's this outline. Then write your script around that. It'll make it a lot easier. And I'd like to add in a fourth, and because I think it's really, really critical, do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Overcome those issues. Don't overthink it. Just do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. So how do you get the gigs? How do you get these gigs? And is it easier to get virtual gigs versus in-person ones? I think to me, it seems like it would be easier to get on a virtual stage or a conference or something like that.
Much
Just
easier.
because it's so easier to get to and yeah, I can, it's a worldwide audience. I can deal with that and I can do that from my basement
Yep.
or my office or, wherever.
Well, remember, there's two uses for this keynote that you're doing. The first one is going to be as a lead magnet, and that one I was do as a webinar. One of my clients, it was the very first one I ever did one of these webinars with, or these keynotes for. He's still using it, by the way, and it's still converting. That was really super. 7 years later, it's still converting. I love it. But what
Cool.
we did is every Wednesday we did a webinar, and right at the beginning there was like two people on there, and I think one of them was one of our moms.
Mhm. Yeah.
We consistently did it and then drove traffic from ads to that webinar.
Uh-huh.
And now we started to build a tribe around us. So, and also what it does is it allows you to record it. And we would go back and have him look at those recordings and say, here's things we can tweak. So by the time we started to get somebody on that wasn't one of our family members or our cat or dog, we knew what was working and what wasn't, and we had a really good vibe.
Yeah.
So that webinar is really important. What we're also doing with that webinar is you're getting a name out there for yourself. People want to go see a name when they go to see somebody speak on stage. And if I had Joe Schmo, who had just done 2 speaking events, probably that's not going to be a name draw. It's going to be much harder to get onto a stage with that. As far as once you get to the point where you're starting to get some, you don't have to be a massive name or anything, just starting to get your message down, starting to get that keynote down. You now are comfortable doing it. That's when you go out and you leverage your network. It is all about a network.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very strong believer your network is your net worth. And it was something that I've had the honor to be able to work around a bunch of amazing people, some amazing speakers who can really help me to not only become a better speaker, but also to get out on other stages. And it's really just about the network. Start with smaller events. There's this huge thing online now, and it's driving me nuts. So I want to address it. There's ads going around going, become a highly paid speaker. That's not going to happen at first at all. Yeah. Just you're going to do a bunch of free gigs, or you're going to have to pay to be on that stage. So just be ready for it. Not until you really have a strong name are you going to get paid, the big bucks for it. And you can be paid pretty significantly to be a speaker, five figures per shot, like the lower end of 5 figures. It's not a small amount, but that's only when you're a very good speaker and you really have a lot of experience and a lot of just go Toastmasters. I mean, go talk. Whatever you
Toastmasters
do.
Is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Start a podcast.
I'm sorry?
Start a podcast.
Exactly. Just something, So I want to make a differentiation here because a friend of mine makes this differentiation as well. So he says there's speakers and presenters. So you're going to be a presenter to start off with. So you're going to have a script you follow. It's not going to be word for word, but you have a regular keynote you give. It's on a consistent basis and you're really good at it. So that's a presenter. A speaker is somebody who can literally just make stuff up off the top of their heads. You're not going to start there. We always have stories for things. Whatever you bring up, I can find a story for it. We're going to go through that, that process together with it.
Yeah.
That's a speaker. So I want to make that differentiation for kind of where I feel it's important to make that differentiation first. Don't try to go out and talk on something you're not ready for until you're ready to be a speaker. It's completely different skill set.
Gotcha.
So I just want to make that differentiation between the two.
Yeah. Now you mentioned webinar, and the question that comes up to me is, okay, so do I use basically the same structure that I would use for a webinar for a spot at a virtual conference? Would I do the same thing, or is it differently?
Yep, it would be the same thing. So especially when you're first starting off, and I know some experienced speakers who use the same presentation. So it's not bad. It's not training wheels. You're not going to look bad. You'll use the same thing so you're always ready. You're always ready with it. I actually picked up a client once from this because he didn't have a regular keynote. He was going to speak at an event. And I can
Uh-huh.
remember sitting in the Airbnb where we were all staying, all the speakers were staying at an Airbnb. And I can remember sitting there with him at 10 o'clock at night going, "What are you going to talk on?" He's like, "I don't know." So don't put yourself in that situation.
Yeah,
Make sure you have it down. Um,
yeah, yeah,
so it's gonna, every event that I've seen, events I've been to, events I've been on, the speakers generally have their kind of standard presentation that they can give. There will
right.
be a few that they might bring in. If they bring in a big name speaker, they won't necessarily have one ready, but they're usually have 20 years experience speaking. A little bit of a
Yeah,
different situation, but most of the
right.
time, especially with like summits, and webinars and things that are done where you bring in a group of speakers who are then selling something, they'll all have a regular pre-programmed, good to go presentation. So yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well,
Yeah.
that's fascinating, really great stuff. I
Awesome.
don't think we followed the script,
I don't think so
but
either.
I think that you dropped a lot of golden nuggets there. Thank you very much for that. So,
Anytime.
Andrew, as we wrap up with your final words, what are
Sure.
three things, and we've covered a lot of them. What are the three things that you'd like listeners to say, "Oh, I'm going to go out and do that." What are three things they can do today to put them into action?
And I love that question because a lot of times we'll listen to something and it's like we'll hear a whole bunch of information come into us,
Yeah,
but I love being left with, here are your tasks, here's your
yeah.
action items. And the
Mhm.
first one I can be is that define what you're selling. Make sure you're really honed in on what you're selling and who you're selling it to. The second part's going to be rehearse, 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 rehearse. And when you're done rehearsing, rehearse again. Make sure you're really, really good at it. Record them on Zoom. And the third one is quite literally go do it. There's always fear, and the fear is the biggest part of speaking. Again, we're wired to not want to do this.
Mhm. Yeah,
I would put it up there at like beyond the gym. I people really don't want to go to the gym, but they do it and it's
they
great. Okay,
do.
fine. I'll put it on Instagram. That's okay. Yeah, no, it's nothing like speaking. There is a huge amount of nerves that come with speaking. And so overcoming that hill is going to be the biggest part of it. Sometimes just do it and suck it the first few times. That's fine. Like I told
Mhm.
you, the webinars, you don't usually get a lot of people on them at first. So if your dog, probably not going to judge you,
Yeah,
but just go do it, try it. You are going to get better as you get more experienced, as you get better at your presentation, and eventually you will get to the point where you will be a very good speaker and can just go do it. Somebody told you, "I have an event going on. Can you come tomorrow?" You'd be able to.
yeah. I like the rehearse part too. I'm a musician, been playing gigs since I was 13. Did 30 shows this on the calendar this year.
Nice.
And I always get a little nervous, just a little bit, especially if I'm in a new venue. Uh,
Mhm.
but we didn't just show up. Well, one of my bands, we never rehearse. We've been together for 40 years. We learn new songs every now and then we forget them. And then it's like we learning new stuff. But seriously, you've got to rehearse. You've got to the more you own your topic, the more that you know what this presentation is going to be. It's got a beginning, it's got that hook in the beginning, it's got a middle, it's got some stories. The peak Sherpa, the mountain peak, the Sherpa, the
Mountain Sherpa Peaks.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And it's got a structure to it and it's got an end. It's so uh you got to know what those are. It's just like a song. For me, I learn songs by listening to them and singing them because I'm a singer also. And I know I can't play the drums and sing the song unless I got to know the drum part.
Mhm.
I have to know that because I can't be thinking about the part playing the drums while I'm singing the lead vocal,
Mhm.
So I have to rehearse over and over and over to get it right. And I'm a fast learner, so I've been doing it for a long time. It takes, but wasn't always that way, and so it takes time, and you got to put in the time to do it. And if you want to be known as a speaker or as a presenter,
Mhm.
if you want to be known as a good one, then you got to put in the time. And if you want to use this to grow your business, you got to do that hard work that other people who are successful that you want to be as successful as are doing. You need to do those things too, and that's a hard lesson for an entrepreneur to
Absolutely.
get their butts out there in front of people and to say, okay, yeah, well, I do have this lawn service that will change the way that you look at your property.
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
or whatever your message is.
Yep.
So,
Use that passion to push you. Use that
passion to push you.
push
Yeah.
you. Because
Yeah.
there's some days when, as an entrepreneur, you're just sitting back there going, "Why did I do this again?" And
Yeah.
there's some days we run exclusively on passion and caffeine, and that's it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Andrew, I know that you have a special gift that talks about how to put on a webinar, and I'm really interested in that. Can you tell us just a little bit about that and how we can get it?
Absolutely. So again, as my mentor Greg says, give your best stuff away for free. Make sure you're giving value to other people. And I wanted to make sure that your listeners had some value. So I am giving away a 15-page ebook. I wrote this specifically to help you to get up and going as far as webinars are concerned. It has everything from how to structure them to a little bit of information on actually physically how to do it. Some of the, so like the
Nuts and bolts kind of stuff.
nuts and bolts kind of things.
Yeah.
What it's designed to do is really to give you the training wheels necessary to get up and do your first one. You're going to have to experience some things. You're going to have to learn a little bit, kind of what works for you. I can teach Zoom all day long, but everyone has their own special way of using it, just to give an example.
Right.
But it's at least enough to kind of give you some ideas on how you would go out and do this. So I wanted to give that away to your audience so they can walk away with something as well.
Awesome. And how did they get that?
So there's going to be a website, a link that I will give you folks.
In the show notes? Yeah. Okay.
In the show notes.
Yeah.
We'll give you a link in the show notes. I often don't like to give links on podcasts because I don't know if you're like me. I'm usually running or something while I'm listening to a podcast, and I'm not ready to click on anything. So, and then I'll forget about it later. So,
right.
As well.
Good point. Yeah. So yeah, you'll be able to find the notes at the leadmachinegrowthshow.com and under Andrew Chesnutt's episode coming up soon. And remember, faith and action go hand in hand. So keep the pedal to the metal. And until next time, I'm Paul Guyan and Andrew Chesnutt. It's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lead Machine Growth Show with Paul Guyan, where we show you how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream so that you can transform your vision into reality. Remember to visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show.